Hey everybody, how's it going? Hope you're having a lovely day. So in today's video, I wanted to go over Eron Wolf's latest grant. If you want to watch an interview with Eron, you can watch it here. I'll link it down below. This is one that is really near and dear to my heart. So for those of you who haven't followed my channel regularly, I talk a lot about right to repair and the idea that you should be able to fix what you own. And if you can't fix what you own, it really does take away from the feeling that you own what you own. And if you've been following this channel for the past 2 years, you'll see that I've been just slowly documenting this process of us not being able to say that we own what we bought and paid for. And this is not just true when it comes to consumer electronics and everything else. It's also true when it comes to things like wheelchairs. And I covered that in 2021, that when it came to wheelchair right to repair, it just got destroyed and it didn't get anywhere. I funded a group. I've been funding them for quite a bit to collaborate with them to create documentation and education and papers that go over really just all the different ways that you get screwed when you are trying to have a wheelchair repaired. I'll also link that down below. And I paid about $20,000 to a great lobbyist last year who actually managed to get this passed, which is, again, pretty cool. And this is the bill. Now, the problem is that at the end of the day, you're still dealing with manufacturer bullshit for the most part. And there's a gentleman that I've been speaking to on and off for the past 2 months that really wants to fix that wants to be a part of the change that he wants to see in the world. And his name is Thomas Queter at the Mobility Independence Foundation. What he wants to do is be able to make open source plans for wheelchairs and open source diagrams so that anybody can build them. And he also wants to facilitate the building of these wheelchairs for people who otherwise can't afford them. A lot of the wheelchairs that you see, again, if you just read through this document, if you read through all the stuff, you have reset buttons that break and people have to wait months to fix them, and they're trying to use a freaking screwdriver and a piece of tape to get it to work. You have like wheelchairs that you literally cannot get you over the door molding in a basic apartment that are considered okay. And the big problem with a lot of these wheelchairs is that they're not really manufactured or not really put together by the people that are going to use them every day. So what he wanted to do is put together a team of engineers that are not only expert engineers, but also wheelchair users every day in their regular lives to create open source wheelchairs so that if you wanted to fix your own thing, similar to what you can do with the Framework laptop, even which is not an open source laptop, you can just easily go on their website and buy all the parts that you need. And I think this is a really noble goal. So, Eron decided to give him $200,000. This was a really funny one because he reached out to me during a very difficult time in my life. So February and March were just like professionally, personally, everything just a complete and utter mess. And I felt bad because all Thomas wanted was to get on my show and just be able to talk about what he's doing. And I kind of blew him off because I had a lot of stuff to do. And I said, listen, I'm sorry, man, I'm not going to have time to talk for a while. So I call him up at one point. I said, listen, man, I have some bad news for you, but some good as well. The bad news is just because of what's going on in my life right now, I don't have time to do a show with you. The good news is if you're a 501c3, I can get you $200,000. And, he was very, very disappointed. You could tell on the phone that what he really wanted was to be on my YouTube program. But he was, he seemed to accept the runner-up. But now I'd like to give him the first place prize of the ability to talk to me. So with that, I will introduce Thomas Queter. And thank you so much for taking the time to watch this. His story is genuinely inspiring, and he's doing what he wants to do to be a part of the change in the world. And I'm pleasured, humbled, and honored to have him on. And I'm really glad that Mr. Eron Wolf over here decided to support him with a $200,000 grant. Would you like to introduce yourself to the audience and what you're doing with the Mobility Independence Foundation?
Thank you for having me, Louis. I'm trying to solve a problem that I've lived for 37 years. I've been in a power wheelchair since I was 4 years old. And because of that, I know what it's like to have to wait 12 hours for a glass of water. I know what it's like to sit still in a room for 5 years while you're trying to find a solution to repair or replace a wheelchair that's no longer available. And the concept of open source came to me through a friend in another initiative. And that's when I realized that it's more than software. I was familiar with open source software, but open source hardware is a thing that does exist. There is a whole ecosystem for it. And, if you can't get your own glass of water, and if you can't leave your home, then you can't find your own purpose and fulfill your dreams and have the kind of life that everybody expects to have. And I just see a need for better equipment that's more repairable, with more access to people who are able to repair it.
So, yeah, one of the things that I've gone over a lot here on my channel are a lot of the issues with repairability. And that's what I really wanted to talk with you about here and how it relates to a lot of what I've discussed with my audience with Apple products. Because when I read through this document, a lot of it sounded really tit for tat, almost identical. Very interesting how we met because you emailed me kind of just really hoping just to be able to be on this YouTube program. And I imagine you were not expecting to get a $200,000 grant from a random billionaire. So, like, one of the things I talk about a lot on this channel is like, I want to be able to get a schematic and it has to be pirated from some FTP server in Romania. Or like, if I want to get a $5 chip to fix a $1,500 board, I can't just go to Mouser, Intersil, and DigiKey and buy that. It has to be smuggled some way through some supplier that, like, God knows if they're just going to take my money after I wire it in Shenzhen or Taipei or Korea or somewhere. And like one of the things that I was reading about here was there was one individual who had a power, I think it was a power or a reset switch on their wheelchair that was giving them issues, and this was not allowing them to get around, and they had to wait months for this. So what they did is they figured out a kludge with a screwdriver and a piece of duct tape. So I wanted to know, like, can you just kind of explain like what a lot of these parallels are between the things that my audience is already familiar with when it comes to MacBooks and a lot of consumer electronics and wheelchairs, so they could kind of understand the very common issues that occur on a regular basis that keep you from being able to get around, that an independent technician could fix inside of 5 to 20 minutes, and also what the problems are in terms of parts availability, ability to access schematics, diagrams, anything like that may parallel with my industry.
Well, as far as schematics, you're not going to get them. That's just it. That period. I actually, on one of my wheelchairs that I have now, the joystick in the human interface device, which is the module that the joystick is in, it needed one little part, about an eighth of an inch by 2 inches, and it's a conductive copper rod with a transistor wire wrapped around it. It's just part of what tells the wheelchair which way to go when you push the joystick. I wasn't looking to replace that part or that joystick module. All we did was ask them for enough specifications on the joystick module to find an off the rack that we could drop in. They actually emailed me back and told me to throw my $65,000 wheelchair away.
Now, can you talk a little about the financing for this type of thing? Like, how much of that $65,000 are you paying out of pocket for this wheelchair? Because I know that there's insurance, Medicaid, Medicare. Like, on average, somebody who's paying like $300 to $700 a month for health insurance, like, what are they paying for that wheelchair?
I have no idea. I am overinsured myself, where I was then. I had Medicaid, Medicare, and private insurance through a parent who worked for the state. And that was a pretty sweet deal. I've always been a lucky guy. But they don't have to cost $65,000. A lot of that number is the middleman companies, if you will. I can give you a good comparison. I needed a new seat cushion once. Very, very specific to me seat cushion. It had to be a flat rectangle, right? Super complicated. And you're supposed to use a specific kind of foam that's antimicrobial and a covering that sheds water and wicks vapor. That way you stay dry and you don't develop bed sores. To get that cushion through medical systems, and I can't tell you which of my insurance is paid for because I'm not sure. But I do remember seeing the number of $2,400 for that flat rectangle covered in a piece of cloth. When I obviously needed a cushion and couldn't get it covered, I just tracked down the materials from the companies that manufactured them. The foam was actually listed for sale by the company as remnants, and the material made by Dartex, or I think they called it Dartex, was also a remnant. I got them on the phone and I talked them into sending me, because they do this in big rolls of certain lengths, and when they get the length, they chop it and there's all these pieces left over. $30 for that cushion instead of $2,400.
Okay, so like that's insane, and this is the type of stuff I really kind of want my audience to be able to understand. And I'm just kind of like, I had two questions for you. They're like, A, when it comes to the price of the wheelchair, when they say throw away a $65,000 wheelchair, does that mean you, the customer, are going to be spending $65K in a new one, or does that mean like your insurance deductible, you're going to pay like $5 or $10K? That on average, I know that it's like, you can't give a very specific answer there. And B, when it comes to that seat cushion, like or let's say when it comes to the joystick or any of these parts, like what would at least through the manufacturer, you have the option to pay $2,500 for a seat cushion, which, dear God, like smother me with a fucking cushion before I pay $2,500 for a freaking pillow. But when it comes to parts like a joystick, do you have the option to purchase that at all? Like, is it an insane price? Like, I'm paying $3,000 for a joystick, or are they just literally telling you there is no option to purchase this whatsoever? Suck it, buy a new wheelchair. Like, I'm just kind of curious. Like, when because I get that they're twisting your arm and screwing you, but I'm just kind of curious how hard they're screwing you.
So, sort of. You can buy some of these parts off the rack, even on Amazon. You can get used ones on eBay, which I've done a lot because of the issues we're discussing. But I personally, I don't recommend it. Typically what they're supplying, and I hate to come off like I hate the industry, but I kind of do. It's caused me hundreds of fractures over the years. You're buying that same piece of garbage. I mean, $300-400 for a new HID. Why do that? Why? It's like,
sorry to interrupt, but what is an HID? I'm
human interface
acronym challenged.
device. Yeah,
okay.
Human interface device.
So that's the joystick?
Buttons, speed controls. The joystick is actually its own module that fits into the HID.
So that's like a sidewinder with like a couple of zeros added to the end.
I guess. What's the sidewinder?
Oh, it's a joystick from the 90s. I feel old now, but like they were like $20 at Radio. It was like you could buy the $15 Radio Shack joystick, or if like you were special, you could buy the $70 sidewinder. With that piece, so is what you're saying, and like tell me if I'm wrong here by all means, like that your only option is to hope and pray that somebody took a wheelchair that was broken, partied it out on eBay without necessarily actually understanding which part of that wheelchair is why it failed, and buy it, pray that it works, and put it in yours. Like you can buy a used one, but you cannot go to the manufacturer and say, I want a new one of this part.
So here's the thing. You can't really go to the manufacturer. There are resellers of new, say, HIDs for some lines of wheelchair. What they've done is they've discovered that there is a market out there for that because of how long it takes to get things through the system. I would still say they're not that cheap. I would still say that their designs are poor. And I would also say that the majority of people who need something like a power wheelchair don't have that money. I'm capped at $2,000 at any given time by the state because of my SSI. However, what I can do is figure out how to get the money and purchase it one way or another. And what that's doing is expecting someone who's dealing with potentially a severe health situation, right? They already have to monitor their medications, their treatments, their rehab. They have to live their daily lives with a severe disability. And now the system that's supposed to provide doesn't, and they have to try and do that too. That's maybe the image of putting more weight on somebody's shoulders as they're carrying a large stack of bricks on their back. It's insane.
Okay, so I'm just trying to understand how the screw job goes. So it seems like this. So the parts are technically available if you're willing to wait an insane amount of time to go through health insurance, Medicare, Medicaid insurance provider. There are third parties that understands that process is miserable, because who the fuck wants to go 2 to 6 months without the ability to get around? So the third parties that know that are kind of like scalpers, and stop me when I'm wrong, that are like, they're selling you a concert ticket for $3,000 kind of thing. Is that approximately understanding the industry?
I would actually say that it's more expensive when you go through the systems than when you go through, say, Amazon or eBay.
It's not an issue of parts. Like for me, it's like if I want to buy a chip, like for certain chips, I literally can't buy it even if I want to pay. Like they just don't exist. So here the parts do exist. It's just you have to go through a Shawshank Redemption sewer of shit to get to them, kind of.
So the HIDs are available for some models, not all. I did run into a situation where my drive motor quit, and that motor had a sticker on it. and it said it was made in Watertown, New York, a couple hours north of me. And I found the company and I called them, and they stated, we're not allowed to sell you one because the manufacturer has the rights to the product.
Yeah, this is what I ran into with the ISL 9240 chip. This is a chip that controls the charger. So like you plug your charger in because your computer's dead. It charges the battery, it turns on, yay, you're excited. That chip is like $5 to $15. They probably cost 20 cents to produce in mass. I can't, when I went to, I think it was Renaissance, or Rochester, I forget. I have a screenshot of this from 5 years ago in one of my videos. When I went to a vendor to say, like, I want to buy 10,000 of this chip, they said I have to be essentially on a certain vendor's list. Apple is not going to allow me to purchase that chip from them. So the chip exists, it's available, but I cannot buy it from them. And then what the customer has to have is a board replaced that costs, like $1,000. And like technically, if I wanted to, I could buy an iPhone XR charging case for $130. I could rip it apart. I could grab this BGA chip. I can reball it and put it on there. But obviously, the difference in both the cost and the labor time to do that repair, and not even mention the e-waste of throwing away a good battery every single time, is considerable. It adds to the cost of the repair. It makes it more complex, takes more time, costs you more money. So like from what I'm hearing from you, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that sometimes the parts are available, sometimes they're not. And when they are available, you're either A, paying a ton of money, or B, paying a ton of time, or C, paying a ton of both.
And there's one more hitch. If you received your wheelchair through Medicaid, Medicare, or private insurance, and you buy your own HID off of eBay or Amazon, brand new even, and put it on yourself, if they know that, they're going to void that warranty and refuse to repair it.
Which is against Magnuson Moss Warranty Act, because it is on them to demonstrate how the maintenance that you did to your product destroyed it. So, if you replaced a hard drive in your computer and your CPU dies, they cannot say that you don't have a warranty because you replaced your hard drive. It's up to them to say, there's a Torx T8 screw, you need to remove this hard drive, and it seems like you have a Torx T8 shaped screw hole going all the way through the motherboard to the CPU. You did this. It's not like they cannot void your warranty at all. It's just they need to provide evidence that it was you, and it has to be damn good evidence. And it sounds like, the FTC is about as toothless in enforcing Magnuson Moss with you as they are in almost every other industry, which is very unfortunate. So
yeah, lemon laws are also not enforced very well. I've been reaching out and talking to others with the same problem for decades. I call myself a disabilities advocate. I'm not paid. I just identify problems I know I can approach, and I help the individual solve that problem one way or another. Any way we can solve that problem, make their life better. I was talking to a gentleman named John in Northern California, and he received a Jazzy wheelchair. That's the name of the wheelchair. It's not just jazzed up. And when he got it, he claimed it had a mind of its own. And what he was trying to describe was that if he pushed the joystick in the direction he wanted to go, it would go in a different direction. Now, by the lemon laws of California and most states these days, they should have replaced that chair. They didn't. What they did was they convinced him that if he waited however long for them to get a tech out there, they would fix it. They didn't. They had the same problem. I just talked to him more recently. After 5 years of dealing with a wheelchair that had a mind of its own. Think about that. Imagine if your legs went where you didn't want them to go. They're replacing his wheelchair with the same chair.
Lovely.
That's disgusting.
Okay, so one of the things, before I get on to what you're doing, what your solutions to this problem are, I really want to make sure I completely understand the problem and whether this bill actually did anything. So in my industry, my issue is that the parts are not available at all, like nothing. So like for the parts that I talk about that I want, I can't buy, the only way that you're getting that part is you're going to Apple, you are spending $3,000 on a computer, and you are taking it off of that one, which obviously completely destroys the economic viability of repair and also creates more e-waste, because to fix your device, I am destroying another, which is just fundamentally wasteful. Unless I wait for somebody to sell a broken one on eBay, that's $600 to $800 that is broken. Other than that, which is, again, if you're trying to do mass repairs in and out, it's not doable. So this bill says the bill requires a manufacturer to provide parts, embedded software, firmware, tools, and documentation documentation and to independent repair providers. It seems like they are providing these things. It's just they're providing them in a manner that is miserable. So like my understanding of it was like with that power button case where that person was using duct tape and a screwdriver to fix it, that he literally could not buy that power button, where it seems like the problem is he can buy it. It's just either A, it's insanely expensive. I'm sorry, reset switch. Either A, it's insanely expensive, or B, he's waiting forever, or C, both. So like this bill says make the parts available, but it sounds like what the problem is you need to make them available within X time frame so that you don't go for 3 or 6 months without a wheelchair. Does that sound correct? And if that is correct, is this bill trying to solve the wrong problem than the actual problem that exists?
Right. So the key word there was provider. After 2008, the number of actual companies that were providers dwindled. I think it was by 75%. The number of manufacturers out there are less because they eat each other up. Sunrise Medical is an umbrella corporation that owns a lot of these wheelchair companies. So what happens is you're a provider of medical equipment. They have the goal to call it DME, durable medical equipment, durable being the oxymoron here. That provider, right, is beholden for work, for profitability to those manufacturers. They're still working in a system that is disgustingly bloated. Nobody's getting repair times in any kind of a quick manner. I know someone in a manual wheelchair in North Carolina. I believe his name is Charles Hall. And when he needs a front wheel replaced, he has to wait if he uses his health insurance. But he can buy one on Amazon and put it on himself. And the purveying message to people in this situation is that you can't do it yourself. You shouldn't do it yourself. You're the one that's disabled. Why should you have to do that? You should just wait in the corner. And I'm not a wait in the corner kind of guy, and a lot of us aren't, by the way. This is not a unique concept. It's just a unique concept that we're trying to proliferate this in an open source manner that facilitates a benevolent supply chain of parts that are already on the market in other industries. And that's a key thing for us at the Mobility Independence Foundation, particularly with our project Endurance, the modular wheelchair, is we're already buying parts that we're testing off of Amazon from other industries. Part of our suspension comes from the trucking industry. Our batteries come from the prepper and camping industry. You can get steel and aluminum anywhere. It's not like you don't have to go to a wheelchair company to build a wheelchair. You just have to know what you need and how to do it. And that's our goal. We want to provide designs with a benevolent supply chain similar to another nonprofit that does this for medications and hospital equipment. And that's where, as a nonprofit, we approach Firestone makes the airbag suspension that we're going after. We approach Firestone. We say, hey, we've got this project for wheelchairs that can deliver faster, better equipment that breaks down less often. And we want to use your part. And they can say, let's take a picture and write it off our taxes. That works for medications, hospital equipment through direct relief. And we think that can work for wheelchairs and parts, not just wheelchairs. A wheelchair is just our first goal. The other issues that we're approaching is safety. And let's remember that wheelchairs for safety are regulated by the same entity that tells us Pop-Tarts are a healthy part of breakfast and an avocado will kill you. Thank the FDA, whom I have circumvented to stay alive more than once in my life.
The thing is, I can talk about these problems all day, and I can ask questions about them all day from my own ignorant standpoint. But what I really want to understand is, like, what is your foundation doing to solve these problems? And more importantly, how do you plan to solve these problems?
So, number one, we're harvesting public domain IP from good equipment that's no longer made. That really makes things a lot easier. We don't have to reinvent every wheel, no pun intended. We utilize people with disabilities who have experience in wheelchairs and our engineers. Our lead mechanical engineer is Devin Hamilton of rapadapt.com, and he specializes in repairing mobility equipment when nobody else will or can, or they don't want to wait. The things you were talking about earlier, that's what he does as a service. He's a very, very intelligent guy. He's already patented 2 wheelchairs. Can't bring them to market though. Market capture, right?
Well, what does that mean for people who don't understand that? So like he's made, but he can't bring them to market. Explain that.
So he has the patents on 2 different wheelchairs, but the other companies are so big and so powerful and so forceful, particularly with marketing. They can't stand the marketing around wheelchairs in particular myself. He can't get his designs purchased by another company because they've already got something under patent and in manufacture, and he can't get them to the point where he can manufacture them and produce them because the big guys regulate you out of the business.
When you say regulate out of the business, do you mean that there are certain elements that have to be included in a wheelchair in order for you to be able to sell it, and they'll constantly change that shit so that smaller companies are not really able to get around it? And more importantly, if that is the case, because I see you nodding your head, which means I could continue my run-on sets to the second question, is how would you get around that yourself? If these people are making these wheelchairs and they can't get to the market, what is going to allow you, what are you going to be doing differently? And when you're like creating these wheelchair designs so that they can be released and publicly sold and be legal?
Well, first of all, we're going to blow those safety standards out of the water. I don't think a safety standard that dictates that a wheelchair has to have a seatbelt that breaks whenever you lean forward is all that safe. And I don't think that allowing the instances of wheelchairs driving themselves, which has happened to me 3 times with 3 wheelchairs.
Sounds like my e-bike.
Is really a decent bar for safety. And I don't think that wheels falling off of wheelchairs after 3 months old also happened to me is a good bar for safety. What we intend to do is network with community entities that already exist. That's nonprofits that are already repairing wheelchairs, and they're usually repairing those same wheelchairs over and over and over again. Mutual aid entities of all kinds. Your church can do it. College campuses. We are working with the Rochester Institute of Technology right now to fund a semester of their support with our endurance project. And we intend to grow that relationship. We have a board member in Arizona who wants to work with those universities who are pretty solid on inclusion. And you know, the best way to be inclusive of those with disabilities is to endow them with what they need to include themselves.
I apologize for cutting you off, but like when I had asked, like if there is a regulatory capture element, so that keeps someone who knows how to build a proper wheelchair and engineer from scratch from being able to legally sell it, because that's what I understood when you were saying that. What are you going to be like? Are you changing the law? Are you like figuring out how to design it so that it is legally? I mainly want to understand what the barrier is there, and then what you're doing differently so that it is sellable.
Okay, so it's not that it's illegal to sell a wheelchair. It's that he can't compete. It's the competition aspect. If your business license costs $500,000 and you're the little guy, you're not going to get that, right?
Oh, so you have to get certified or something. Is it like the certification process, like crash testing when you release a new car or something? Like,
actually, I'm sitting in the only wheelchair I've ever heard of actually being crash tested.
I'm just trying to understand what it is that, like, what's the market barrier? What's the very specific market barrier, if you could explain it in like one sentence, that keeps that dude from being able to sell his wheelchair to the public?
I'm not entirely sure. I just know that he's been trying for years. I do know that in almost any business setting, competing with the big guys is the hard part. Getting that foothold and getting your product known is the hard part. In terms of there's also a lot of marketing that's a problem. I've seen a advertisement. I got this nice little folder with all the pamphlets and specifications, and it had this rugged looking guy in the wheelchair with this chain that was so massive that even if he was that rugged and the chain was actually metal, it probably would have broken his shoulder. hooked to a 73-foot long tractor trailer as if he were towing it. Now, I have tested the wheelchair that was advertised in, and there's no way he was towing that truck. And the concept that these commercials are where the value is insane. Have you ever seen a Burger King commercial, Lewis?
No, I haven't had terrestrial TV since 2004.
Well, you got
I'm a shut-in.
We kicked ours in 2007. So in the 90s, I was a 90s TV kid because my wheelchair was broken down. You would see this commercial with this big, beautiful burger on it. Right? It was juicy and the vegetables had color. And when you got through the drive-through, that's not what you got. They're showing you something that you're not going to get. And the other aspect here is something that actually Devin put very well. Engineers don't think about maintenance and repair when it comes to wheelchairs. So what should be an easy repair becomes not easy. What should be durable becomes not durable. The greatest misnomer in this industry is that, oh, you get a wheelchair, life is perfect now. Go forth and climb mountains. And the fact is that that's not what's going to happen. What's likely going to happen is you're not going to leave your house much because it's not going to be comfortable. You're not going to leave your house much because it can't go very far or very well or through much of a terrain. When I applied for a wheelchair the last time to the systems, I was actually told that being able to get over the threshold of my door to leave the house was not an adequate justification for a better wheelchair. So in terms of the market, I mean, they're selling all kinds of things, right? And most of it comes down to what can you get covered by insurance? And that's the problem that we're really solving here.
And are you solving that by making wheelchairs that are covered by insurance? Or are you solving this by creating wheelchairs that are cheap enough that you don't have to give a shit about going through insurance because instead of it being $65,000, it's like $4,000? Like, what way are you solving that problem?
Neither. A benevolent supply chain. We want to fundraise for the parts. We want to request those parts from the manufacturers that already exist and are paying taxes. Corporations, they look for these tax write-offs and they look for these PR stunts. And I'm perfectly willing to take advantage of that. So the greater concept is you will not pay for that wheelchair. People who care about whether or not you can get out of your house will voluntarily pay for that wheelchair.
Now, is that wheelchair that these other people are paying for, is that fundamentally cheaper as a result of being an open source design that you create? Or is this a wheelchair that is still going to cost as much as that one? It's just you're getting rich people to fund it, just so I understand the path there.
Closer to the latter. We don't know the actual cost when we're done, and I don't care if it costs twice as much. What I care about is its value, right? Dollar for value is something we need to think about more. If you buy a dozen eggs for $1 and you buy a single egg for 10 cents, that single egg actually costs more, and 12, technically costs less. So building a supply chain that can handle that model will work.
Help me understand what it is that makes a wheelchair cost more than a used Corvette, because that's the part that I think a lot of my audience are probably like, what the actual...
Yeah, it is, I don't know, 5 or 6 or 7 years ago, I looked it up and there was like 10 new cars you could buy for the price of a wheelchair, about $19,000 in New York right now.
Yeah, like what I'm seeing like a motor that's less powerful than what's on my bike, a Sidewinder joystick, a chair, and a seatbelt. And it's like, how does like a 2015 Corvette cost less than that? It's just the part that's absolutely blowing my mind. So like I could understand with large companies that maybe they have some sort of deal where in exchange, that's kind of what I was trying to get at before when you said this other company couldn't sell because of like the system or large companies putting barriers. I really wanted to understand what that was. And like if there was some sort of regulatory capture nonsense where you need to have these millions of things in order to sell it, or you need to like, these are our patents, you have to pay us royalties, I would understand that. But it's very difficult for me to understand how an open source one of these things, like what goes into it that I'm ignorant of as a MacBook repairman with a room temperature IQ that causes this to cost that much money.
In the open source form, it won't cost that much money. And that's largely because you're not competing with the insured market. What is a forced market, Lewis? I mean, the insurance companies are required to pay for things. And so the companies that make the things that the insurance companies are required to pay for, Jack, we see this with the EpiPen, right? Then it's the uninsured that end up failing there, or the less insured end up failing there. And I don't want anybody to have to worry about whether or not they have a wheelchair. I mean, you also have to consider human value here. The product needs to hold its value. There's absolutely no reason why the wheelchair I'm sitting on shouldn't be a 30-year wheelchair. Most wheelchairs are required to be replaced at year 5. And so what do manufacturers make? Wheelchairs that don't last more than 5 years, because then the insurance company has to pay for another one.
Okay. Now, explain to me the specific process by which you're going to go about creating these open source designs, how these open source designs are going to get distributed, and most importantly of all, what is the process between you starting what you're doing and like me, if I fall off my e-bike, being able to have an open source wheelchair? Like, you just kind of spell it and assume that I'm an idiot as you're spelling this out, because it would be a correct assumption.
So third step is to create the design with access to the parts, right? And our parts are largely off the rack, right? That the design is open source, but the specific parts will be mostly readily available already, with the exception of the motor controller, the HID, and in one instance, the transmission. Yes, my wheelchair has a transmission, and we're going to put one in ours.
How fast does it go? I'm sorry to cut you off there, but
yeah, that's another pet peeve of mine. Most wheelchairs you get today will not go more than 5 miles an hour. And if you've ever been in a large parking lot when a teenager was driving through it, you understand why you need to go a little bit faster.
Okay, transmission to go over 5 miles. I'm not going to waste time on that in this interview. I'm just curious, but it could continue. My apologies for cutting you off there. That was rude.
Sure. So, in terms of how Louis Rossman gets a wheelchair if he wants one. Louis, if you've got the money to buy the parts and the people to help you put it together, the design is there, the access to where to get the parts is there, and you can just go forth and do it. If you can't afford to do that, you can come to us and we will attempt to get you funded. There are many ways to get a person funded, although GoFundMe is not a good idea anymore up to that 1099K thing. What you want to do is create access, right? So if we get, let's say we get 100 of every part donated to us in terms of tax write-offs, then we have 100 wheelchairs that we can give away, or 100 of those parts that we can give away. Other nonprofits can work with us. They can fund things. They can grant to individuals. There are so many ways to actually provide the access to it that I don't see why we're not.
Okay, so I would go to you for the design, and then I would find somebody to manufacture it, or you would find somebody to manufacture your design for me, and you would also find somebody to sponsor the payment.
All of the above options.
Okay, so you have options. Do you have contacts with people that are that like, you know, would be willing the moment you have a design and parts present to just like get on it and start making these for people?
We already have a handful of people, and they're actually some of our engineers and myself. I am the unofficial crash test dummy, and there is a reason for that. My condition causes severe brittle bones. By the time I was 16, I had over 1,000 fractures to my skeleton, twice what Evel Knievel had in his entire career. And so if it's safe for me, and I'm kind of a crazy guy, I do all the things that I'm not supposed to, then it's going to be safe for most people. And I actually joke with the engineers. I said, you know, you better make this safe because I'm going to drive it through a wall that's on fire. The real issues are not can we do this or how we do this. It's that we do this. Somebody has to choose to actually do this. And the unfortunate thing is that when it comes to most technology that falls under the category of durable medical equipment, they're made by people who aren't using that equipment.
So it's fundamentally out of touch. Like, that's how you get to a point where you have a wheelchair that doesn't allow you to get out of your door because they've never measured it, because they never had to give a shit about it. Is that?
Correct.
Okay,
Um,
and
I'm,
now one of the questions, now I obviously like one of the $1 million question here that I imagine a bunch of people are curious about, like with a $200,000 grant to start this, like how does that kind of money get used, or what are your plans for it now that that's there? Because I imagine that that's slightly more useful than a YouTube show with me, slightly.
um, thank you for both, though. So we already have um, an engineer that's Devin at Rapidapt lined up, and we have a contract to build design and build 3 iterations of the chassis. That would be the frame, the transmission. One of them will not have a transmission, wheels, and suspension. From there, you can put almost any seating system that's already available, and I tend to have a few laying around on it for testing the chassis. We intend to work with RIT. We're waiting for their cost proposal for the project to build the seating system, which is very integral. The batteries are interesting. You can buy them anywhere on the internet. I actually upgraded the chair that I'm sitting into from lead acid batteries to lithium iron phosphate 4 batteries.
Yeah, I was gonna say I was hoping it was like lithium polymer rather than lithium ion due to the whole like I can jump off of my e-bike when I set it on fire, but yeah, that's obviously an issue. I was curious how that worked.
No, this does have a battery management system that keeps it from setting on fire. We've actually seen YouTube videos of the ones that I'm sitting on right now get shot with a shotgun and do nothing, get dropped off a building, and the only thing that happens is it breaks the concrete pad that it landed on.
Yeah, like the lithium polymer, it's less efficient. It's less energy per the amount of battery, the weight of the battery. But like if you do that, it just kind of smokes and steams rather than giant violent fire, which is preferable there. So what would you want the audience to know about this foundation, the problems with this entire industry in general that they don't know, rather than just answering my yapping questions? I'm curious. Like, what do you think people need to know?
Life is more than prescription pills and cable TV. It's more than staying in one room. It's more than being helped all the time. I want you to imagine what it would actually be like to be stuck in a room for 5 years. I want you to imagine what it's like to wait 12 hours for a glass of water. And I want you to imagine what it's like to not know what the outdoors is like. There are people who should be doing these things, and they're not because the equipment is not good enough. It's not up to par. And I have to give credit to some companies. Action Track is actually a good company. They're selling a track chair that will take you through the woods, and it's a great thing. I tested one last June. Problem is twofold. You're not going to get that covered by anybody. You got to have that 30 grand up front. And they are doing like payment plans and the like, and that's cool. But problem number two, not going to be able to cook myself a meal in my kitchen. You should be able to have something to get you around your own home, to your toilet, to your stove, to your sink, and climb the hills up behind my house like I do. I believe that life is about growth and exploration and taking risks. If you're not doing that, your mind's not active. And if your mind's not active, why are we here? We're here to learn. We're here to experience. We're here to have all the fun. I mean, Louis, if you wanted a coffee right now, you could turn this show off and go get in your car and go to the coffee shop that you like and get the cup of coffee, right? Me, I have to sit here and wait until someone's able to take me. The other thing to recognize is that someone in a situation like mine, and there are many others, it's not just their life that it affects. Imagine what my parents felt like when the wheel fell off my wheelchair that was sold to us to be a rugged outdoor wheelchair for kids and dumped me on the ground, and I had over 100 fractures and injuries. Imagine what their lives were like. I can, because I sat there and listened to them crying in the next room. I watched the frustration every time the wheelchair breaks down. It is not just the individuals, everyone who cares about them. And the more that we endow anybody with a physical limitation with the tools that they need to live a full life, the more their families and their communities are going to actually feel better and know that will know that there's a whole human being experiencing a full life. And I think that's extremely important.
I look forward to seeing your success, and I look forward to seeing your designs and the manufactured, complete designs of giving a lot of people a lot of happiness, giving them the ability to have repairs done quickly so that they're not waiting months for a reset button, and really just having the freedom to get around in general. And I genuinely can't wait to have you back on here once you've put that 200K to use and like that really created something awesome. Last question: if there are any other again, like, there's 2 million people on this channel. Like, hopefully there's more than 1 billionaire. If somebody else wants to, throw 6 or 7 figures your way, where do they find you?
Well, they can find the website at themif.org, or they can email me directly, thomas@themif.org. And we do have some social media, but we're all more tech-minded than social media-minded. We like to build things that work, as Jim, our electrical engineer, would say. So unfortunately, our social media presence has not kept up as well. We do have a Facebook. It's there. We do have a Twitter. I don't think we've used it. But follow them all anyhow. And, of course, share Louis Rossman's show.
Well, thank you very much for taking the time. I really appreciate it. You're a brave dude. You got balls, and I hope that you wipe the floor with the existing state of the wheelchair manufacturing industry, and I can't wait to see what you produce. I couldn't think of anybody else deserving of the 200K. It's a pleasure and honor talking to you, and I hope you have a lovely rest of your day.
Thank you. You too. And, if we do get this completely off the ground and I decide that I want to take one of these out to the desert and strap a rocket to it, you coming with us?
Absolutely. Listen, like when you're talking about transmissions in 5 miles an hour, I've attached a 5 kilowatt Cyclone on my bike. I've put 10K through it. I'm gonna want something a little faster, and I may be if it is open source completely, I would like the ability to modify this a little bit. I will sign a waiver of liability though before you give it to me.
That is absolutely the case.
And then 10 minutes after using it, I'll probably actually wind up needing it because.
Well, that's the other thing about this. If you have the means and the money and the will, you can prepare for when you're going to need this. You can build one ahead of time. The only interesting thing about open source is that somebody can take this and turn it into an automatic lawnmower. And then when they need a wheelchair, it's not that hard to turn it into a wheelchair.
Yeah, I guess a $65,000 lawnmower. I wouldn't, I wouldn't put it past John Deere to start selling that. Anyway.
Right.
I'm going to cut it off now since I know that you're probably going to be late to your next meeting, and I don't want to take up more of your time. Thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Louis.